1930s. In fact, could I get classes from the 1930s and 1940s to stand up, please? How about the 1950s? Okay, thank you very much. It's now my pleasure to introduce Kenneth "Ken" Douglas Taylor. Diplomat, businessman, a personal friend of ours, born and raised in Calgary, attended Crescent Heights High School, better known when he was at Crescent Heights as Tex Taylor. Now I leave that open to your interpretation, and maybe he'll explain where that nickname came from. After Crescent, Ken graduated from Victoria College, University of Toronto, and gained an MBA from the University of California, Berkeley. He joined the Trade Commissioner Service in Canada in 1959. He then became ambassador to Iran in 1977 and was catapulted to international prominence by engineering the Great Canadian Caper. For over 2 months, he and his immigration officer and their wives, at great risk, hid 6 Americans after the U.S. Embassy had been seized by Iranian revolutionaries, and 66 hostages were taken by them at that time. As the hostage drama dragged on, Taylor and the Canadian government began slowly to close the Canadian Embassy. Staff left gradually, classified documents were shredded, and unclassified material moved to the New Zealand Embassy, which had agreed to tend to Canadian interests. Finally, after several delays, on the 28th of January 1980, the 6 Americans escaped the country on a Swissair flight to Zurich, posing as Canadian filmmakers, using Canadian passports. In bureaucratic parlance, this operation was referred to as an exfiltration. Taylor was not far behind. He and his remaining staff closed the embassy and left on a flight later that day. The decision to leave on commercial flights, drawing less attention, was Taylor's. Coming at a low point in America's self-esteem, the news was sensational, and Taylor became an instant celebrity. He received the U.S. Congressional Gold Medal and thousands of other gifts in a 10-month period of gratitude. In 1998, it was revealed that the CIA, the CIA was extensively using Taylor as their representatives in Iran. The story of the Canadian Caper has been put on the big screen, most notably in 1981 as Escape from Iran in the Canadian Caper. He was portrayed by Canadian actor Victor Garber. In the 2012 film Argo, which I'm sure many of you have seen, based on the event, but like many others U.S. films, it was more fiction than fact. And Taylor received very little recognition as the real hero he was. But that did not matter to Ken. After Iran, Taylor was Canadian Consul General in New York, and then left the public service. He worked extensively in the private sector, serving as a senior executive with Nabisco, and as a board member of a variety of companies in Canada, the US, and Mexico. He's consulted with clients on issues of political risk, international marketing, and strategic accommodation with government agencies. He was made an officer of the Order of Canada in 1980. Over the years, Ken, now living in New York, has been a frequent visitor to Calgary. He has never forgotten his roots. And remember, he's one of us. Please welcome a very humble, modest, real Canadian international hero, Ken Taylor.
Well, I'm delighted to be home. Everybody has a song, a group, whether it be Gershwin like we heard tonight, that catches their moment and their spirit. And one of mine is the Eagles, who may have been one of your favorite groups. They had a hit, a song that was called Hotel California. And the telling line was, "You can check out, but you can never leave." And I think that sums up all our relationship with Calgary. Doug, thanks for that very generous introduction. It's a delight to be introduced by Doug. I was going to say an old friend, but let me say a friend of many years. Doug is an irrepressible force. Whether it be on the football field, whether it be in the law court, whether it be in the boardroom, whether it be at a nonprofit organization. And if you've ever been run over on the football field by Doug Mitchell, you will never forget it. I still have the cleat marks on my forehead. When I heard about the reunion, my first response was, nothing in Calgary is 100 years old. Even the sandstone buildings haven't been long 100 years. But there it was. So I thought about, of course, what a marvelous occasion. And it's exceeded every expectation. Organizers have done an extraordinary job, and I think it's apparent, it's going to be logical, that next year the Stampede board will have to resign to be replaced by the Centennial Committee. A reunion you anticipate a reunion, but maybe you experience some degree of trepidation. After all, you'll see somebody who broke your heart. You'll see somebody you recognize, but they matured a bit. All the good memories come by. And isn't it amazing that you forget and rub out most of the ones that are troublesome? Your report card has nothing but A's and B's. What happened to those moments of panic when you looked at that blank piece of paper? I only have 2 hours and nothing seems to be happening up here. But the main thing is that we attended. We've been offered a marvelous evening. Last night, I understand, was a marvelous start. But how did we get here? Well, Jackie, you arranged an event, a dramatic event on May 14th, a Blackfoot powwow, because the land that Crescent Heights is on is Blackfoot land. And so the occasion, the powwow, gave credit to the custodians originally of the land. And then in 1875, the Northwest Police Detachment came to the junction of the Elbow and Bow River and decided that they should build a fort. And it must have been the summertime, because otherwise, clearly, they would have gone on to the Okanagan Valley. They called it Fort Wieswa, and then changed it soon to Fort Calgary. Now, did the police officers have any vision? Did they have any idea why they settled at the junction of the river? They may have. It may have been by instinct, or they may have become a directive from Ottawa, which they could have ignored if they wanted. But soon after that, of course, Calgary's dream came true, because in 1883, the last spike of the Canadian Railway was struck in Calgary. And kaboom, Calgary's never looked back. Mind you, a few moments of hesitation. But generally, Calgary is one of Canada's hub cities. And today, we may not necessarily turn to statistics, but 1/2 the population of Canada now lives in Toronto's Golden Horseshoe, Greater Montreal, the Edmonton-Calgary corridor, or Greater Vancouver. Canada's future rests with its cities. I hope to see the day where the federal government, the provincial government, and the city would 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 share power and influence. Maybe that'll happen. Calgary is one of 3 nominees. I don't mean to offend Edmonton, Montreal, Halifax, but potentially Canada has the capacity to foster one hub city. And certainly it's going to be among Toronto, Calgary, or Vancouver. I think the bets in Las Vegas are on Calgary. It's got a resilience, it's got a spirit, and it's reflected here tonight. Doug really articulated very eloquently his time at Crescent and the teachers. Today I had the chance with Terry to visit the archives, visit the library, visit the photographs, and of course, you pretend to recognize yourself. And what came back, however, was what the teachers gave us. It was big time, I remember, when finally you graduated from Balmoral Junior High School and came to Crescent Heights. I mean, you were on the brink of adulthood. You became an authentic teenager. So who was going to shape your destiny? Who was going to do something about your deportment? Who was going to give you spirit and motivation? And who did that but your teachers? And I'm sure that last night, during the day-to-day, when you visited and saw the bugle, the other remembrances, the other photographs of sporting teams, is the instinct. What struck you was what teacher was involved with you at that moment, and what that teacher left with you. So I think for most of us, we arrived as what would you call, I'm not sure, the sub-teen maybe, but we thought, at least the teachers, took us to and led us to young adults. And that is, I think, the most formative years that we would have. In my own case, I had a curiosity about crossing a border. And I read a book recently by Ryszard Kupipinski, who was Poland's leading foreign correspondent. In 1955, he was working in a newspaper in Warsaw, and he said to his editor, "I'd like a foreign posting." And in Poland in 1955, you didn't go anywhere without the government's permission. She was rather alarmed. She said, "Why would you want that?" He says, "I want to cross a border." He said, "I don't care if it's Czechoslovakia, I don't care if it's Germany, I'm not looking for something like New York and Rome and Paris." And that is characteristic of many Canadians, particularly many Canadians today, and thinking of those graduating next Friday. Because Canada has a lot of space, and we're working on our history and our geography. But with a population density of less than 5 people per square mile, we're a relatively small country in terms of population. Our future is not only resting in our cities, but it's resting beyond our borders. The instinct, I think, today is far more broader and earlier comes to realization about the need for Canada to look beyond its borders. Through fate, accident, happenstance, luck, maybe it was the lottery, I got a job in Foreign Affairs. I began the job as an FSD-1. Now, that was a Foreign Service Officer, Development 1. There's no job in the world lower on the totem pole than an FSD-1. My first posting was Guatemala. And as an example of Canada's increasing involvement outside our borders, we had one embassy in Guatemala City. Now we have an aid program. We have I think a very positive and crucial immigration flow. We have 3 embassies. Business executives visit frequently. But everything was more or less put in proportion when I first arrived, when a friend asked me to visit the American embassy. There were 2 of us in a modest building, Canadian embassy, Canadian flag. I went to the US embassy, which looked on a castle on the hill. He said, by the way, here's somebody with the FBI, here's somebody with the CIA, here's somebody with the DEA, here's our military attaché, there's the ambassador. Went on, I went back to our modest embassy, and with remarkable insight, I concluded that maybe the US had more influence in Central America than we did. I next went to Detroit. Now, I know you're going to say, Detroit, is that a foreign posting? It was intriguing, the Automotive Pact. Probably most of us, now, unless you're a traditionalist, a baby boomer, maybe you don't remember the Automotive Pact of the early 60s, where automobiles could trade back and forth between the US and Canada. And that, up until now, probably was the most important trade pact that Canada and the US have signed. I next went to Karachi. The war was just finishing with India, and it was finished, the war, when I said to one of the staff, I said, do you mind if we take the black curtains out of the windows? He said, no, sir. He said, you can never trust the Indians. I was living in Pakistan at the time, so naturally you agreed. I would have said something else if I would have been in New Delhi. I was then transferred to London, and today, how many of you visit London? All of you. But in the short space of time, London has become, and England, a prime trader with Canada, a dominant force, to somebody who we get along with now, but really isn't very influential in terms of our future. Britain itself is changing as Canada changes. But in the space that I was there, say from 1977, 1971, the relationship between Canada and Great Britain has changed fundamentally. I don't use that as a pejorative comment about Great Britain. It's just that today, things happen with such a rapidity that don't get too self-satisfied about where you stand vis-a-vis other countries. Our political leaders often say we're the greatest country in the world. Well, take pride in that. But other countries are changing faster than we are, and be very careful for those passing on the inside lane. After London, swinging London, I was hoping I did as little amount of work as possible in London, so I wouldn't be noticed in Ottawa, because I didn't want to leave London. But inevitably, in the Foreign Service, you go back to your capital city. I was there for some years, and then I was somehow, with whatever happens in bureaucracy, I got assigned to Tehran as ambassador. At that time, Iran was riding the crest of the wave. The Shah had just had the audacity to bid for Pan American Airlines. It was one fashion or another treated with the same trauma in the United States as when Japan bought Pebble Beach and the Empire State Building. That was the nature of Iran at that time. It had a king who was a true king. He looked invincible. Of course, that soon unraveled. The revolution came, and the revolution is still going on. The involvement of Canada at that moment in Iran was an involvement right from the Prime Minister on down, through those of us in the public service, through those in the military. It was a Canadian effort generally. But the one aspect that is not recognized, I think, to the degree it should, is the role that Prime Minister Joe Clark played. Joe Clark was the one who would have faced the circumstances, political circumstances, if it wouldn't have worked out. When I proposed this is what we do, he took moments to say, that's the right thing to do, that's a Canadian instinct to follow. He didn't micromanage it, he gave total support, whatever we proposed, and during the election campaign which followed, he was very reluctant to use it as a campaign plank. So of all the aspects, all the interpretations that come out of Tehran, I think the missing link certainly is Joe's own vital contribution. And I don't say that necessarily just because he's from Alberta. Following the time in Tehran, of course, it looked as if one way or the other, through a vision, you could make a movie. The first movie was proposed, it was a CBS television movie, and as Doug said, Gordon Pinsent played myself. I thought with far more pizzazz than I bring off in a day's work. But when you are portrayed in a movie, you tend to lose your identity. You're a different person, at least you're perceived by the public as somewhat of a different person. I'd often be in an elevator, and somebody would get in and say, well, your last movie was okay, but not that good. I'd say, well, you do the best you can, but then if the camera was on, I'd say, well, Gordon, one way or the other, has his own role to play. I do, but events moved on, so Hollywood decided to make a movie. I'd read about it in the Hollywood Reporter that George Clooney had bought the story from the CIA agent, that Ben Affleck was going to produce it, and then finally that Ben Affleck was going to act as the CIA officer. Thought, well, here's another opportunity. And you can't help yourself sometimes. Everybody has a touch of vanity. Who's going to play me? I was so fortunate with Gordon Pinsent. Well, I thought, let's see, let's look at the James Bond movies. Well, somebody said, well, maybe you should be thinking of Mike Miles and Austin Powers. I said, maybe that's more realistic. Argo was a sensational movie. It was entertainment. It was a scriptwriter's fantasy dream. What the story was is a remarkable degree of contribution between Canada and the United States. The CIA were of some assistance to Canada, to put it in proportion. But what the movie did do, other than massive box office and an Oscar winner for Ben Affleck, was to remind the US public that that's what their men and women abroad in the US Embassy face. And certainly this was underlined because the next week after it came out was the tragedy in Benghazi. Our Man in Tehran was a documentary that's recently been shot here, and it's a fair portrayal, I think, of what went on. But looking back at the passports, the missed planes, the deceit, the lies, the corruption, the excitement, the despair, whatever a job abroad entails frequently in countries that aren't necessarily in control of their destiny, what do you take away from that? What do you bring back, or what do you recollect, or what purpose did it fill? I think that in some sense it's getting back to an earlier comment that what about the graduates next Friday? What do they face? They face an interconnected world. They face Islamic extremism. They face divergent views. But they also face a country, in terms of opportunity, a globe without borders, but at the same time, contradictory countries with a greater sense of nationalism. It's going to take a lot of audacity, a lot of guile, and a lot of good, solid Canadian thinking for them to progress through a world that is certainly more complicated than that what we faced. In conclusion, combining that with general remarks about the future of a young man and woman today, is that when you look at the situation where it just seems to be ever-ending small wars with no conclusion. Look at the Middle East today. The idea that the ISIS can be eradicated is naive. It's going to be around for a generation in one form or another. Now, on the one hand, you have a military response, and you need a military response to achieve a diplomatic breakthrough. But a military response at the moment may make you feel good. It's direct, it's dynamic, and momentarily may be successful. Diplomacy, on the other hand, seems ponderous, deliberate, boring, too much talk, but that's the nonviolent avenue. And I think certainly those countries who committed themselves to the coalition Afghanistan, the valor that men and women, particularly 2 Canadians, maybe 158, it was the time NATO felt, which it was our umbrella essentially, needed. But at the same time as forging a success through NATO, don't forget that which would closer approximate the United Nations. Give diplomacy a chance. At this moment, it's time to, again, not necessarily on a Saturday night, to be more profound, maybe reflective, but at a conclusion of the night, at least in the true sense of the word, celebrate. Celebrate a truly remarkable 100 years of Crescent Heights, which has meant so much to all of us.
Thank you so much, Ken, for your remarks. Doug as well. I'd like to call up to the podium and Murray Anderson.
With these old eyes, that might not be the best thing to do. Honored guests, spouses, and fellow Crescent alumni, welcome and thank you, thank you, thank you. We couldn't have done this without you guys, and it's turned out way beyond our expectations, and Stu and I had lots of sleepless nights where we didn't think we had the numbers or numbers weren't going to line up, and obviously it's been a big success. Thank you. I'll give you a little history lesson here. Some 15 years ago, some like-minded alumni had a meeting at the A&W on 4th Street and 16th Avenue Northwest, and we decided to form this Alumni Association, of which some of us are still here today, and I don't think any of us thought we were going to be here today chairing this committee. As it turned out, I drew the shortest straw that day, and I became the first chairman of the Alumni Association, followed by Stu. And in that 15 years, there's only been the two of us that done that. So I put an ad out right now that we're having a AGM coming up at the end of this month, and anybody out there that would be so inclined might have a position on the executive. Our alumni had very meager means, and we started at a golf tournament 13 years ago, and the intent of that golf tournament was to raise funds for scholarships for the students. We have given out some $42,000 in scholarships now from the proceeds of the golf tournament. These aren't necessarily scholastic scholarships. They go to families that are in need financially. So those kids have gone on with a little bit of help from us, and we feel pretty good about that. Some 3 years ago, we decided that we were going to put on this 100th anniversary party. And in earnest, we got there about 2 years ago, and we hit the first roadblock. The Calgary Board of Education had changed their policy and wouldn't allow any alcohol in the school. And I thought that was rather strange, because back in '69 when I went here, we used to sell rum at the dances. So it had come full circle. Poor Jackie came in here as the first year principal, and we landed on her that we wanted alcohol, that there wasn't going to be another 40th or 100th anniversary in 40 years for CBE high school. And I think Jackie got either afraid of us or scared or just got tired of us. So she put us on to other people in the CBE, and we made those comments. We begged, cried a little bit, got nowhere. So we had been trying to get this building early in that time frame, and we had made a few approaches, and the curling rink only had a liquor license for so many months of the year, didn't have insurance, they wouldn't talk to us. And my son's father-in-law, Tom Guppy, who had nothing to do with our school, but he curls here, kept at it, kept asking. And Stan took over as the new chairman or the general manager of the rink. He said, why not? He said that'd be a great thing for the school, great thing for the curling rink. Stu and I think big sometimes, more Stu, he's got some really big ideas. We thought that we were going to have 3,000 people at this thing, because Dave Rader, when he chaired the 25th anniversary at the 3 different events they had that time, they had 2,500, I believe, came through the turnstiles. We look back in hindsight, if we had had 3,000 people here tonight, we would have been hooped. We decided early on that it was going to be $100 for the weekend to be $1 a year, And if we had to take this meal down to the Stampede grounds, for example, where it would be the only place that held 3,000 people probably, we would have been in deep financial trouble. While I'm making some thank yous here, Stan and Denny and Nicole from the curling rink. I can see Denny. Nicole's got her hand there. And I don't know if Stan's here. Thank you very much, because you've been fabulous to work with. Anything we wanted, it's gone through. In exchange, the Alumni Association is sponsoring the women's Briar Patch that's going to be in the playdowns for the women's going to the Tournament of Hearts, and it's going to be held here, but the Briar Patch is going to be in Crescent Heights Community Hall. There's Stan, wave. Thank you, Stan. Back in the room. So the Alumni Association is going to have their name on that as a thank you for what Stan did for us today. Baba's Catering. People out there, we've had Jim Barber, thank you. Great job. I think for anybody that ate any of the meals today, it was excellent, and to put on something in this venue was terrific. And I've got one name that I can't, but we had Cake Works made the cakes for us tonight. What's the name? I don't know. Don Davis did all of the desserts on Friday night. So Don, are you here? Stand up and say thank you to Don. With that, I'll turn it over to...
Well, it's so good to see everybody out tonight. This has just been an amazing weekend. And as Murray said, there's been 2 presidents in the history of the Alumni Association. And it wasn't that long ago that Murray and I were talking, and the topic of the 100th anniversary came up. And I said to Murray, who do you think's going to do that? I'd sure like to help them out if we could. And Murray kind of looked at me in the way he does and said, you know what, I think it's you and me. So that's all right, we work together, we do a lot of business together, and you know, there's 2 schools of thought in doing business. One is you ask permission, the other is you beg forgiveness. Well, unfortunately, Murray and I both use the beg forgiveness school of thought, but I thought, well, you know, that'll work out. So, and it did. Here we are tonight. So, our main job here is to thank all our volunteers. You know, you don't. 4 people don't put this on. It takes everyone to do their part. They take a job on, and they do it so very well. So, we're going to thank our volunteers. We'll ask them to stand. If you could hold your applause to the very end. It's going to take a minute or 2 to get through the list, but we feel it's so important that these people are recognized. The work has just been fabulous. The work in the archives, the memory book, the meals, the cake servers, everybody's done a great job. And before we do that, I want to thank my new best friend. He's giving me Spanish lessons. Mi amigo Christian Griffenstein of Urban Audio. He's done a great job for us. And can we get a little bit of a light show going here? There we go.
We're going to start with the committee chairs, and I'll ask them to stand up, and we'll give them a round of applause because these people have put out a lot of energy over the time frames. If anybody was downstairs and saw the archives, Iris Sordonskik, wonderful job there, and we'll get them to stand up. We'll have the applause after. The Centennial Store was run by Jenny Woods, who's a teacher at Crescent, been here a long time, coached my kids while they were here. The Entertainment Committee, Brock Smith and Murray Cameron, and they'll be playing later tonight. Finance, chaired by Deb Gubert, Fundraising, Debbie Kotowski and my brother Russ Anderson. Information, Liz Harder. Memory book, which was given to you in your packages Friday night. Wonderful job, Gloria Dalton. Photos, the Sergeant Major that got everybody in their places last night was once again Jenny Woods. Promotional VIPs, Terry Parsons. Publicity, Brian Ganchef, who is the chair of the golf tournament, by the way. It's a plug, it's coming in June. Registration, Jody Curran. School liaison, Susan Leach. And security, Rick Masden. Can you all stand and we'll give them a big round of applause.
Okay, the second group of volunteers we'd like to recognize, first of all, Ada Yan, Alexandra Gubert, Alex Hawkins, Catherine Bush-Sahalik, Christy Hambly, Cindy Fivey, Courtney Leach, Darlene Kendall, Dave Gubert, Don Davis, Deborah Abraham, Donna Schneider, Doug Anderson, Edna Gardner, Fran Cormack, Gail Dawson, Gary Parchewski, Grant Patterson, Holly Jean Catanega, and Jack Ewert. Would you all please stand?
Next group, Jane Hambly, Jean Blackstock, Jeannie Stewart, Jennifer Tanish, Ginny Chang, Jerry Kotowski, Jessica Irwin, Jim Anderson, Judy Morris, Karen Jans, Karen Williams, Kathy Bolin, Kay Madsen, Larry Adorjan, I believe. Sorry if I butchered your name, Larry. Leanne McDougall, Linda Sharp, Marla Kirby, Kippy, Maureen Darling, Mary Ann Dalton. Would you stand and everybody give them a round of applause?
Okay, next group, Melanie Anderson, Morgan Tarbs, Nancy Eng, Pat Letourneau, Peter Curran, Rich Parsons, Robert Eng, Rod Birchall, Sandy Blaine, Shannon Jones, Sharon Connolly, Tim Kendrick, Tom Cormack, Tom Spear, Tom Tate, Tyler Tarbs. Everybody stand.
Rather than naming them individually, our special thanks to the teachers, Jackie Chapman Brown and your group, and the students that have done a fabulous job, whether it's helping serve tonight here, the guided tours, the play that they put on last night, and singing today. Fabulous job. And Jackie, I want to thank you for all the help that you gave us. I know that we were a little hard at times, but thank you for allowing us in the school and being part of this celebration.
Okay, well, it's pretty obvious that Murray and I didn't do this by ourselves with all the volunteers. We have two special volunteers, and it's time to beg forgiveness again because neither of them really wanted to come forward at all. But it's so important. Our management group was Murray and I as co-chairman, and two fabulous ladies who assisted in our finance and in our school liaison. So I'm wondering if at this time I could have Deb Ebert come forward and Susan Leach. take a while. I think Deb is in the front doing some calculations, or there she is.
As I said earlier, Stu is the big idea guy, and Deb would always make sure that the funds had to be in the budget line. You can't go overboard here, so this thing has to break even at bare balls minimum. And as anybody knows me, I'm a procrastinator extraordinaire, and both of these ladies kept pushing and kicking when it was needed. So terrific, and let me tell you, this wouldn't have happened tonight if it wasn't for these two ladies. And you've all heard the story, behind every good woman, there's a good man. And I'd like to acknowledge David and John, because without them, being at home at night sometimes and missing meals, meetings, and both of them got commandeered into the helping of the arrangement, filling coffee, making ice runs, finance. So John and Dave, if you're in here or outside, thank you guys very much. Stand up, there they are, Pat. And I can only say for myself here, but I'm going to pass it on to Jane too, my wife. I've been in trouble once or twice, let's put it that way, for the time that was spent sometimes here, and my volunteerism for this is done. So thank you. One of the things that we want to do with this alumni 100th anniversary celebration was to leave a legacy at the school. And when we had the 3,000 number, we had a lot more money left over at the Golden Pot at the end. And now, with the numbers down a little bit, we might not be as fat. We started something called the Centennial Club, which we asked for a $100 donation, and quite a few of you did that, which we will give you a tax receipt. But if anybody so desires and wants to be involved with the Legacy Fund, and we're going to do something bricks and mortar, we haven't discussed it and haven't got it finalized, please see us and we will give you a tax receipt for whatever donation you want to give to the school. And it'll be for something that's a legacy from this night. So on my behalf, thank you. I'll let Stu finish.
Okay, final words. I just want to say welcome home to everybody who came. Thank you so very much for keeping the faith. As Jackie says, cowboys forever, and let's have a party.